And last night, the 770 sent this one. I know I'm missing the revenue sharing window a little bit, late to the conversation, but I've always thought that if there is inequity in revenue sharing, the team that is being paid more should proportionately share its excess with any team that beats them.
Here's why that's not a plausible idea, in that it has nothing to do with who's winning. None of that.
No, you're right.
None of it has to do with who's winning the league. I mean, honestly, only two teams have regularly, like I gave the stat last week, and he may have missed this, but of the last 33 ACC titles, and there are some shared ones in there, but Florida State and Clemson have had a share at least of 24 of them. So it's not about who's winning the league, because most of the time it's them anyway. But even in the years where someone else like Georgia Tech or Wake Forest or Virginia Tech won the league, the television numbers are still on the side of Florida State and Clemson. That's why they're mad. Now, is that a fair metric overall to grade people on? That's
hold on, stop for a second. They're mad because others they're competing with elsewhere are getting more money.
Yes.
Not because of the revenue and the revenue sharing being equal.
Yes, exactly.
That created that math.
Yes, so that those things, but then when they say, well, we're getting this, creating this much of the value of the league, it has nothing to do with if they win the game or not. That's a like kind of a, could be a one-off thing. Like, so you want to give Boston College a bonus because they had the greatest upset of their life? Okay, great. Well, I mean, what does that really do? I mean, like, that's not a sustainable metric either. So I get it. Like, oh, you're getting more, you should beat them. But, when Texas, A&M, and Oklahoma, and I guess Nebraska were all getting unequal revenue share, it wasn't about who was winning then either, because A&M was getting more and they weren't beating Nebraska all that often. I think they maybe only beat them like 2 or 3 times, and one of them was on the way out the door and it was like 6-3.
Yeah.
So
it was and Dominican Sue's year.
Yeah. So it doesn't make it. That doesn't really stick with me.
I think it's just a fair question. I mean, not everybody follows it as closely as we do, obviously. And so, I mean, I can understand where it gets a little bit confusing when you're hearing all these terms about revenue sharing and this and that, and you're just simply a sports fan who's wondering how wins and losses still matter the most. And then you come to a point in time where they don't matter really in this at all, although I guess you could argue that winning helped create the brands to be as big as they are, or helped get them there over time. But yeah, I mean, that's not how it works. It's about TV eyeballs and about who brings in the most of those and brings in the most money. Because if it was about winning, then yeah, the college football landscape would look a lot different. And you wouldn't see the same old teams who, no matter win or loss, they stay in the exact same spot no matter what. That wouldn't necessarily be the case. But yeah, that's not what this is about. But it does make you wonder, like, yeah, if Oregon or Washington was getting unequal revenue sharing, and the odds are that they would win probably more often than not. But if, Utah was, kicking their head in every year, and then, whoever else you would want to throw in that mix, like Oregon State or something, was like the premier, team all of a sudden and was beating them every year, it would be a little funny, wouldn't it? And you'd maybe wonder, if you don't follow it super closely, of like, why are they getting paid more than us? We're winning, we're beating them regularly. We're winning the conference. Like, why are they making more money? Well, just because they're a bigger brand and they bring more eyeballs. It's really that simple. But yes, believe it or not, we do talk sports where it's about wins and losses, and yet this is a conversation where it isn't even so much about that. It's about eyeballs and TV viewers and revenue and things of that nature. So, yeah, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but it doesn't work that way.
It is a fair point, and in fact, Paxton said that. And then again, it's not the way it works, but it's a fair point, because if you look at the highest revenue stream programs, yes, Ohio State has held their end of the bargain, more so. Then you have some that haven't. I mean, even USC recently, up until last year, they had been hit and miss. Texas, of course, has had a decade of a lot of disappointment. They've had some nice games and wins along the way, but we understand that's who they are. That's part of the deal. And but yeah, that would almost be like what would that be? would be like a salary cap in a way. All right, you're allowed to make this much, but you got to give some of it back. What do they do in baseball? What's that called? It's a
it's the
baseball's not that
the
way,
luxury tax.
The luxury tax.
Yeah, but I don't think. But see, that's just it, because it's a year-to-year basis. So the other thing is, all right, what happens when Clemson's 15-0? Nobody's getting any of that money, right? So, or if they have the seasons like they did where they won the national championship and lost in the playoff game and only lost one game along the way for 2 years, one team's getting $50,000. I mean, what's the...
No, you couldn't.
Okay,
There's no way you could ever come up with any kind of math to figure that out.
So when Florida State was 4-8 a couple of years ago, how do you determine... Okay, so they lost to Clemson and they lost to UNC. Well, they've never lost to UNC, but they lost to Clemson and they lost to, Miami, who might have also been in this mix. So those two don't count because they're already getting money. And then the other 6 schools get how much of that money? Like, there's no way to actually do it. And that, like, I get that it's a punishment fee for being snooty and being better, but like, it's never been about that. Like, it's never been about that for any conference that's done this. You mentioned USC. USC sat in meetings for several years deciding the Pac-12 wasn't doing well enough for them. Well, they weren't really doing well enough for the Pac-12 either, but still getting ratings because they're USC. So that's what it was about. I mean, like, Texas and OU left the for the SEC because they felt they could get no bigger in the Big 12. Now, a lot of that was their doing, but Texas for the last decade hasn't been moving the needle as far as, when it comes to wins and losses, but they still do when it comes to notoriety. I mean, that there's a difference between what counts and what matters. And like, what matters to, fans is winning, and what counts to the people who are in charge isn't necessarily that, because they can't do that.
Which teams have moved conferences? Texas and Oklahoma, we know exactly why. Both of them command and get a ton of people who watch them. They also have incredible tradition, even though Oklahoma's had much more the last 20 years than 10 or 15 years than Texas. And they're money makers. Huge.
Look,
they don't feel that they're making the money that they deserve because they are being held down by smaller schools who aren't going to allow them to have a conference that is going to get a TV deal like what the SEC has. So they are moving to a neighborhood where everybody has a similar house, not where there's 2 mansions in an average neighborhood everywhere else around it. They want to be on Mansion Row and not the 2 houses that stick out like sore thumbs. And so they are going to a neighborhood where it's more like what they want to be and what they are accustomed to and what they feel they deserve. And you know what? You can't fault either of them for that in any way, shape, or form. That decision, I don't think there's any podcast that needs to be done about it or any feature. It's simple as day. I mean, it's simple why they moved, and nobody can fault them for it. You can fault the manner. You can fault like some of the parting shots. You can take issue with those types of things, but the decision itself, really, if you were in their position, it is an absolute no-brainer of a decision, and everybody else would have done the same thing.
And the thing is we're talking about 6 schools here, right? We're talking about Texas and OU. Florida State and Clemson have now started to dip their toe into this water a little bit, and USC and UCLA. And if it was about winning, then UCLA in football, winning in football, then UCLA with those 5 schools belongs nowhere near that conversation at all. They have been mediocre at best for 25 years. They have not won a conference title since 1997. So it's not about winning when it comes to UCLA. For UCLA, it just happens to be that the last 2 letters of their name. That's what that's about. So again, let's not get it twisted that somehow that there's honor among this thing when it comes to, well, we haven't won, so we don't deserve this. No, that's not what it's about. And winning is cyclical. Everybody's had bad stretches.
How would you like to have a conversation, a recorded conversation with USC if they contacted UCLA, or how that went about, kind of like the Texas OU one, how that went about, hey,